Hello everyone! Today we are going to be reading Chapter 7 of Little House in the Big Woods. It's all again in one video score. So today we have two vocab words. The first one being maple sugar. So we know about maple syrup. We know about a lot of, maple tasting things like maple donuts. Well, those all come from a maple tree. So it comes from the sap in a tree. Okay, and we will learn about that in this chapter. And it's really interesting. But the first thing I want to show you is the maple sugar. So maple sugar, there we go. So maple sugar can sometimes be made into like a small brick, and then they shave off little bits of sugar. So then they just shave off little bits to make anything sweet. Remember, sugar and sweetness is not an everyday thing. You only use sugar when you need it. So, a brick like this might last a family, half a year. So it was very important to have sugar and to be careful with it and to not waste it. So sugar is a very hot commodity and is very expensive. So we'll see in this chapter how maple sugar is made. And then our second vocab word is a Delaine. So a Delaine is a type of dress. So a Delaine is when you think of, 1800s dresses with the beautiful buttons down the front and the very tailored and beautiful dresses, and they're long and they have the big skirts. That's a Delaine. So this is a copy. So in this chapter, we are going to, in this chapter and the next chapter after this. Mostly in the next chapter after this. It's just mentioned first in this chapter. But in chapter 7, it talks about the Delaine. And I think in this chapter, it describes it. And this is a replica. Oh, you can't really see it with the light. There you go. This is a replica of Ma's dress in the story. So it's got beautiful dark navy velvet with little flowers all over it and beautiful buttons down the middle. Okay, and then here is just an example for you to see. Let me see. It sometimes doesn't work when I turn the brightness up. Yeah, you can kind of see it, but it's got the beautiful ruffled sleeves, the buttons down the middle. It's got the big voluptuous gown at the bottom. It's got all these petticoats and other things that we're going to talk about in the next chapter. But a Delaine is a expensive, nice dress, because you couldn't just go out and, buy this at the hardware store. No, you had to take time and make it and take care of it. So clothing was very important. So we read in our last chapter about how Pa went and traded the furs, and he got material for the girls to make new clothing. That's what calico is. Calico is just the new material that Ma is using to make these cute new dresses for them. So that was really nice. Can you imagine you only have two things to wear? You have your Sunday dress and your regular dress, and that's it. Or your Sunday clothes and your regular clothes, that's it. You don't have, you just get what you get, because clothing was very expensive. All right, so now, let's see here. We're going to talk about Chapter 7, the sugar snow. Got a cute little bunny. Okay. For days the sun shone and the weather was warm. There was no frost on the windows in the morning. All day the icicles fell one by one from the eaves with soft smashing and crackling sounds in the snowbanks beneath. The trees shook their wet black branches, and chunks of snow fell down. When Mary and Laura pressed their noses against the cold window pane, they could see the drips of water from the eaves and the bare branches of the trees. The snow did not glitter. It looked soft and tired. Under the trees it was pitted where the chunks of snow had fallen, and the banks beside the path were shrinking and settling. Then one day Pa set a patch saw a patch of bare ground in the yard. All day it grew bigger, and before night the whole yard was bare mud. Only the icy patch was left, and the snowbanks along the path and the fence and beside the woodpile. "Can I go outside and play, Ma?" Laura asked, and Ma said, "May, Laura, may I go outside and play?" she asked. "You may tomorrow," Ma promised. That night Laura woke up shivering. The bed covers felt thin and her nose was icy cold. Ma was tucking another quilt over her. "Snuggle close to Mary," Ma said. "You'll get warm." In the morning the house was warm from the stove, but when Laura looked out the window she saw the ground was covered with soft, thick snow. All along the branches of the trees the snow was piled like feathers, and it lay in mounds along the top of the rail fence and stood up in great white balls on top of the gate posts. Pa came in shaking the snow from his shoulders and stamping it from his boots. "It's a sugar snow," he said. Laura put her tongue quickly to a little bit of the white snow that lay in the fold of his sleeve. It was nothing but wet on her tongue. Like any snow, she was glad that nobody had seen her taste it. "Why is it a sugar snow, Pa?" she asked him. But he said he didn't have time to explain now. He must hurry away. He's going to Grandpa's. Grandpa lived far away in the big woods, where the trees were closer together and larger. Laura stood at the window and watched Pa, big and swift and strong, walking away over the snow. His gun on his shoulder, his hatchet and powder horn hung at his side, and his tall boots made great tracks in the soft snow. Laura watched him till he was out of sight in the woods. It was late before he came home that night. Ma had already lit the candle when he came in. Under one arm he carried a large package, and in the other hand was a big covered wooden bucket. "Here, Caroline," he said, handing her the package and the bucket, and then he put the gun on its hooks over the door. "If I'd met a bear," he said, "I couldn't have shot him without dropping my load." Then he laughed. "And if I'd dropped that bucket and bundle, I would have had to shoot him. I wouldn't have had to shoot him. I could have stood and watched him eat what's in there and lick his chops." Ma unwrapped the package, and there were 2 hard brown cakes, each as large as a milk pan. She uncovered the bucket, and it was full of dark brown syrup. "Here, Laura and Mary," Pa said, and he gave them each a little round package out of his pocket. They took off the paper wrappings, and each had a little hard brown cake with beautifully crinkled edges. "Bite it," said Pa, and his blue eyes twinkled. Each bit off one little crinkle, and it was sweet. It crumbled in their mouths. It was better even than Christmas candy. "Maple sugar," said Pa. Supper was ready, and Laura and Mary laid the little maple sugar cakes beside their plates, while they ate the maple syrup on their bread. After supper, Pa took them on his knees as he sat before the fire and told them about his day at Grandpa's and the sugar snow. "All winter," Pa said, "Grandpa has been making wooden buckets and little troughs. He made them of cedar and white ash, for those woods won't give a bad taste to the maple syrup. To make the troughs, he split out little sticks as long as my hand and as big as my 2 fingers. Near one end, Grandpa cut the stick half through." So these are troughs down at the bottom. Yeah, these little things right here, these sticking trees, those are troughs. Okay, let's see here. This left him a flat stick with a square piece at one end. Then, with a bit, he bored a hole lengthwise through the square part, and with his knife he whittled the wood till it was only a thin shell around the round hole. The flat part of the stick was hollowed out with his knife till it was a little trough. He made dozens of them, and he made 10 new wooden buckets. He had them all ready when the first warm weather came and the sap began to move in the trees. Then he went into the maple woods with the bit. He bored a hole in each maple tree, and he hammered the round end of the little trough into the hole, and he set a cedar bucket on the ground under the flat end. And so you've got the little troughs to take the maple syrup out of the trees, and the buckets underneath to catch the maple syrup. The sap, you know, is the blood of a tree. It comes up from the roots when warm weather begins in spring, and it goes to the very tip of each branch and twig to make the green leaves grow. Well, when the maple sap... Oh, wait, not yet. Well, when the maple sap came to the hole in the tree, it ran out of the tree, down the little trough, and into the bucket. "Oh, didn't it hurt the poor tree?" Laura asked. "No more than it hurts when you prick your finger and it bleeds." Every day, Grandpa puts on his boots and his warm coat and his fur cap, and he goes out into the snowy woods and gathers the sap. With a barrel on a sled, he drives from tree to tree, empties the sap from the buckets and into the barrel. Then he hauls it to a big iron kettle. So here he is. There's his sled with his giant barrel. And here is his big kettle where he puts all the sap. Let's see here. He empties the sap into the iron kettle. There is a big bonfire under the kettle, and the sap boils, and Grandpa watches it carefully. The fire must be hot enough to keep the sap boiling, but not hot enough to make it boil over. Every few minutes the sap must be skimmed. Grandpa skims it with a big, long-handled wooden ladle that he made out of basswood. I'll show you one more time. A big bonfire with a big ladle. That's pretty cool. When the sap gets too hot, Grandpa lifts ladles full of it high in the air and pours it back slowly. This cools the sap a little and keeps it from boiling too fast. When the sap has boiled down just enough, he fills the buckets with syrup. After that, he boils the sap until it grains. When he cools it in a saucer. Okay? So here's Grandpa putting all the sap in buckets. The instant the sap is graining, Grandpa jumps to the fire and rakes it all out from beneath the kettle. Then, as fast as he can, he ladles the thick syrup into the milk pans that are standing ready. In the pans, the syrup turns to cakes of hard brown maple sugar. So like the big brick, it just turns into a big sugar thing. So that's why it's a sugar now, because Grandpa's making sugar? Laura asked. No, Pa said, it's called Laura said, is that why it's called a sugar snow? Because Grandpa's making sugar. No, Pa said, it's called a sugar snow because the snow this time of year means that men can make more sugar. You see, the little cold spell and the snow will hold back the leafing of the trees, and that makes a longer run for sap. Then there's a long run of sap. When there's a long run of sap, it means that Grandpa can make enough maple sugar to last all the year, for common every day. When he takes his furs to town, he will not need to trade for much store sugar. He will only get a little store sugar to have on the table when company comes. Grandpa must be glad there's a sugar snow, Laura said. Yes, Pa said, he's very glad. He's going to sugar off again next Monday, and he says we must all come. Pa's blue eyes twinkled. He had been saving the best for last, and he said to Ma, Hey, Caroline, there'll be a dance. Ma smiled. She looked very happy, and she laid down her mending for a minute. Oh, Charles, she said. Then she went on with her mending, but she kept on smiling. She said, I'll wear my Delaine. Ma's Delaine dress was beautiful. It was a dark green with a little pattern all over it that looked like ripe strawberries. A dressmaker had made it in the East, in the place where Ma came from when she married Pa and moved out west to the big woods in Wisconsin. Ma had been very fashionable before she married Pa, and a dressmaker had made her clothes. The Delaine was kept wrapped in paper and laid away. Laura and Mary had never seen Ma wear it, but she had shown it to them once. She had let them touch the beautiful dark red buttons that buttoned the basque up the front, so the front piece, and she had shown them how neatly the whalebones were put in the seams inside with hundreds of little crisscross stitches. It showed how important a dress was. If Ma was going to wear this beautiful Delaine dress, Laura and Mary were excited. They bounced up and down on Pa's knee and asked questions about the dance. At last he said, "Now, girls, run along to bed. You'll know all about the dance when you see it. I have to put a new string on my fiddle." There were sticky fingers and sweet mouths to be washed. Then there were prayers to be said. By the time Laura and Mary were snug in their trundle bed, Pa and the fiddle were both singing, while he kept time with his foot on the floor. All right, so that was chapter 7. Got some exciting news. There's going to be a party. There's going to be a party. All right, so don't forget our 2 vocab words of maple sugar and Delaine. Those will be in the description box below. And also don't forget about our 4 notes. There should be 4 notes. And that was all of chapter 7. So a picture on the back from chapter 7, okay? All right, guys, I love you. Have a good rest of your day. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to look at your quiz and see if there's any questions on there from chapter 7, okay? All right.